it minutely. I presume, as I see bloodstains upon it, that it is the one which was found in the dead man's grasp. Watson, this knife is surely in your line. It is what we call a cataract knife, said I. I thought so. A very delicate blade devised for very delicate work. A strange thing for a man to carry with him upon a rough expedition, especially as it would not shut in his pocket. The tip was guarded by a disc of cork which we found beside the body, said the inspector. His wife tells us that the knife had lain for some days upon the dressing-table, and that he had picked it up as he left the room. It was a poor weapon, but perhaps the best that he could lay his hands on at the moment. Very possible. How about these papers? 3 of them are receipted by hay dealers. 3 of them are receipted hay dealers' accounts. One of them is a letter of instruction from Colonel Ross. This other is a milliner's account for £37.15 made out by Madame Lejourier of Bond Street to William Derbyshire. Mrs. Straker tells us that Derbyshire was a friend of her husband's, and that occasionally his letters were addressed here. Madame Derbyshire had somewhat expensive tastes, remarked Holmes, glancing down the account. 22 guineas is rather heavy for a single costume. However, there appears to be nothing more to learn, and we may now go down to the scene of the crime. As we emerged from the sitting-room, a woman whom had been waiting in the passage took a step forward and laid her hand upon the inspector's sleeve. Her face was haggard and thin and eager, stamped with a print of recent horror. "Have you got them? Have you found them?" she panted. "No, Mrs. Straker, but Mr. Holmes here has come from London to help us, and we shall do all that is possible. Surely I met you in Plymouth." "At a garden party some little time ago, Mrs. Straker," said Holmes. "No, sir, you are mistaken." "Dear me, why, I could have sworn to it. You wore a costume of dove-coloured silk and ostrich feather trimming." "I never had such a dress, sir," answered the lady. "Ah, that quite settles it," said Holmes, and with an apology he followed the inspector outside. A short walk across the moor took us to the hollow in which the body had been found. At the brink of it was a furze bush upon which the coat had been hung. "There was no wind that night, I understand," said Holmes. "None, but very heavy rain." "In that case the overcoat was not blown against the fuzzy bushes, but placed there." "Yes, it was laid across the bush." "You fill me with interest. I perceive that the ground has been trampled upon a good deal. No doubt many feet have been there since Monday night. A piece of matting has been laid here at the side, and we have all stood upon that." "Excellent. In this bag I have one of the boots which Straker wore, one of Fitzroy Simpson's shoes, and a cast horseshoe of silver blaze." "My dear Inspector, you surpass yourself." Holmes took the bag, and descending it into the hollow, he pushed the matting into a more central position. Then, stretching himself upon his face and leaning his chin upon his hands, he made a careful study of the trampled mud in front of him. "Halloa!" said he, suddenly. "What's this?" It was a wax vesta, half burned, which was so coated with mud that it looked at first like a little chip of wood. "I cannot think how I came to overlook it," said the inspector, with an expression of annoyance. "It was invisible, buried in that mud. I only saw it because I was looking for it." "What? You expected to find it?" "I thought it not unlikely." He took the boots from the bag and compared the impressions of each of them with the marks on the ground. Then he clambered up to the rim of the hollow and crawled about among the ferns and bushes. "I am afraid that there are no more tracks," said the inspector. "I have examined the ground very carefully for 100 yards in each direction." "Indeed," said Holmes, rising. "I should not have the impertinence to do it again after what you say, but I should like to take a little walk over the moors before it grows dark, that I may know my ground tomorrow, and I think that I shall put this horseshoe into my pocket for luck." Colonel Ross, whom had shown some signs of impatience at my companion's quiet and systematic method of work, glanced at his watch. "I wish you would come back with me, Inspector," said he. "There are several points on which I should like your advice, and especially as to whether we do not owe it to the public to remove our horse's name from the entries for the cup." "Certainly not," cried Holmes, with decision. "I should let the name stand." The Colonel bowed. "I am very glad to have had your opinion, sir," said he. "You will find us at poor Straker's house when you have finished your walk, and we can drive together into Tavistock." He turned back with the inspector while Holmes and I walked slowly across the moor. The sun was beginning to sink behind the stables of Capleton, and the long sloping plain in front of us tinged with gold, deepening into rich, ruddy brown where the faded ferns and brambles caught the evening light. But the glories of the landscape were all wasted upon my companion, whom was sunk in the deepest thought. "It's this way, Watson," he said at last. "We may leave the question of whom killed John Straker for the instant, and confine ourselves to finding out what has become of the horse. Now, supposing that he broke away during or after the tragedy, where could he have gone to? The horse is a very gregarious creature. If left to himself, his instincts would have been either to return to King's Island or go over to Capleton. Why should he run wild upon the moor? He would surely have been seen by now. And why should gypsies kidnap him? These people always clear out when they hear of trouble, for they do not wish to be pestered by the police. They could not hope to sell such a horse. They would run a great risk and gain nothing by taking him. Surely that is clear." "Where is he, then?" "I have already said that he must have gone to King's Island or Capleton. He is not at King's Island, therefore he is at Capleton. Let us take that as a working hypothesis, and see what it leads us to. This part of the moor, as the inspector remarked, is very hard and dry, but it falls away towards Capleton, and you can see from here that there is a long hollow over yonder, which must have been very wet on Monday night. If our supposition is correct, then the horse must have crossed that, and there is the point where we should look for his tracks." We had been walking briskly during the conversation, and a few more minutes brought us to the hollow in question. At Holmes's request, I walked down the bank to the right, and he to the left, and I had not taken 50 paces before I heard him give a shout, and saw him waving his hand to me. The track of a horse was plainly outlined in the soft earth in front of him, and the shoe which he took from his pocket exactly fitted the impression.